It seems like a lot of different packages and stuff. Why don't you just use Blender, dude?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. You're gonna get the Blender cult coming after me.
Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and this is Pixel Peeping, where we take a closer look at some of today's best artwork along with the artists that create it. Today with me is Jared Chavez, senior character artist in the game industry at Turtle Rock Studios, and we're going to be taking a closer look at his latest character model, Ricky, the Cyberpunk girl. So what's up, man? Thank you for coming here.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for having me. I'm, glad to get to talk about this piece. So
Yeah, so I mean, people probably wouldn't know, but we know each other because we work together at Turtle Rock. So
yep,
and
for
technically,
sure.
I'm your boss too, technically. So,
More or less, yeah.
so this should go good, or you're out.
Yeah, we'll probably talk and take notes again tomorrow after this thing goes down. So
Yeah, no, but yeah, really excited to jump into it. Honestly, I think like this artwork is phenomenal. It's really cool that we get to talk about it. Let's look at the artwork now, like close up, and then I'm sure I'll have a ton of questions.
yep, this is the piece. This is the character. It overall was just a piece done for ArtStation Learn. Overall process of creating a game character for something like an art test, and just some of the process of going through each individual step, some of the things to expect, some things that could come up, and ways to approach certain situations.
Well, this is a crazy art test. I feel like you got the job. Whatever test this
Yeah.
is, I think you got the job.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we had gone back and forth about this during the production of this piece, and I definitely did a lot of overkill things, and this is probably not everything that you would expect in an art test. There was a lot of things, I probably could have gotten away with just doing this upper bust, but
Which
I'm
is still
kind of a glutton
amazing. I
for
mean, the
pun.
fact that, yeah, this is crazy, dude, that you're still going. This is an awesome presentation, by the way. Sorry to keep like interrupting you. It's
Oh no,
just,
you're good.
you're saying a lot of words, but this amazing shit is on the screen here. The colors, just the lighting, dude, everything, man. It is really, really well done. And it's great how you scroll and there's just more and more and more. And I can't believe it's a full character too. Really cool.
Thanks, man. I like to get my mileage out of my projects, so this is one that I definitely committed a lot of time to. I really wanted to present it in a couple of different ways, and that's something for like my own personal work that I like to do. Is I like lighting, so if you look through a lot of my different pieces, there are different ways of lighting the scene, just trying to evoke different emotions and things like that. And this one was a little bit of back and forth. This lighting didn't come until later. I saw like a Cyberpunk 40 or 2049 piece, and that's a really cool lighting setup. Let's just throw something together really quick, and then it ended up being my favorite lighting setup that I had created. Here's some breakdown process over time of just how the project iterated, where things were still looking a little bit not their best, not to final, and just how it kind of improved over time and got to the final piece.
Really quick, let me ask you here then too, like how long would you say this took, this project? That's a common question.
In total, it's kind of a little bit skewed just because I was having to record for the filming and editing, and so there was just a lot of different tasks on my plate at once. But in total, I would probably say that modeling took about maybe a weekish. Texturing was probably about another 3 to 4 days. Hair was about a day, and lighting and rendering was maybe another couple of days on top of that. But a big majority of it was recording everything, writing scripts, editing all of the footage together, just figuring out some of the planning and stuff. So overall, the entire project took 2 months of time. And for me, this was like a first learning experience in terms of recording in front of a camera, figuring out how I wanted to edit the footage together, all while creating the actual character and stuff. As you know, we had talked about this project as I was making it. I definitely overcommitted on a lot of things. Some of the choices that I made, it could have been just the head, but I wanted to get the most out of it.
I mean, here you are though, it paid off. Can you maximize this image right there? Yeah, we did talk about it. I do think you bit off a lot, and I'm always like I'm always urging artists to not do that. It's just a common mistake, you know, a pitfall. But if you can muscle through it and get through the whole thing, like I said, I think you really do have like a phenomenal work here.
Thanks, man.
You know, totally worth it. And I think it serves both things, you know. Just a little bit more too on this. If you didn't figure out, you know, what he meant by ArtStation Learning, that he's filming it. That's one of the amazing things about this, is that a lot of this process was recorded to be used in an ArtStation Learning class, and so those I think are still free. If not, it's so cheap to just become a member of artstation.com. At the time that we release this, you can go there right now. Like, you can go in depth in how some of this is made, which I totally encourage you to do. I mean, it's an amazing resource right now, honestly.
I know. And you know, like with it, the hard thing with this project was when I do my personal work, I definitely like to challenge myself, and this piece was probably the hardest piece that I've done, just because of everything that I was juggling and managing. And, you know, on top of that, I try to spend time with my wife, and family comes into town and things like that. So it was definitely a challenge, but, you know, it didn't divert me from the fact of like modeled underneath the jacket just for the purposes of, because I wanted to, and I did all of this detail, not because it's needed, but it's just something that I like to do. Yeah, I'm sick, and I have a tendency of punishing myself. And to make things worse, as you know, I also converted the entire process to Unreal to get familiar with UE5, setting up some shaders. Just here's a comparison between the two.
Oh, great.
So
can we talk a little bit about that? Obviously, Unreal is great. I'm using Unreal all the time now. You were, you know, an expert with Toolbag, and you use it all the time. And you started this project with Toolbag, you know, Marmoset Toolbag 4 for people that don't know. And that has some rendering features that are really nice, and they're very different, but I think a lot of people like to hear about why people choose what, because I think right now the default, people think let's just make things in Unreal, and there's definite reasons to do that. But if you could get into like some of your preferences in Toolbag and maybe some of the nuance, it might be good for people to know why you favor it in some cases.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest reason for me is a couple of reasons. The first being, I actually like it for baking purposes. I use it in my workflow. I feel like I just have a little bit more control when I'm doing my bakes. And when I run into issues of messed up normals or issues with just any of the utility maps that are generated, it's easy to fix. So for me, that's part of why I use it. And then I just know that the results are going to look good, because that's where I originally authored the maps. So once I get everything exported, I know it's going to look good. I have shied away from using Unreal just for the fact that I'm not as familiar of creating materials and, you know, being able to create some of these complex looks inside Unreal, which for me, this is part of the reason why I wanted to convert this project over to UE5, is a little bit of a challenge trying to make some of these materials. So like with this, it's a little bit subtle, but creating some of like that iridescent look to the jacket that I had in Marmoset, creating tileable materials. So, you know, I have like 4 channels, which is a pro for me using UE5 to Marmoset. I do have a lot more control. The best bang for your buck is the hair, as you know. Marmoset's hair unfortunately doesn't support the Alembic cache information yet, so that's kind of a little bit hard. Your scene tends to run a little bit heavier, but the ray tracing, it's great.
It's super good.
It's awesome.
Not all GPUs are equal when it comes to Unreal Engine, and so to have every feature that you would want, you need particular like NVIDIA RTX enabled GPUs, and also you need more VRAM and memory to be able to do things like hair. So you really feel it from a hardware point of view, and Toolbag is a lot more broadly accessible, and you get actual ray tracing. What an Unreal Engine is called path tracing, where it's like really tracing paths and you have to wait for it to cook. You know, it's not exactly real time, but you can still build everything in real time. And as you said, it's easier in Toolbag to just start making materials, like just plopping them on there. And in Unreal, you start with an empty room with a bunch of tools everywhere, and you have to like assemble it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Marmoset is very accessible. It's easy to just get really high quality materials fast. And for me, that's part of the reason why I like it, is I don't have to fiddle with things and mess with things. But now that I've taken a step to Unreal, I feel like it's a little bit more accessible for me. You know, I'm very fortunate. I do have people like you as a resource that have been able to kind of like help me find my footing. But I do run into that same situation, as you said. I don't have a GPU that can do ray tracing in Unreal. So that is, you know,
that's
another kind of inefficient way for me, because if I want the best quality picture, for me, I think Marmoset does give me that, but Unreal has a lot of advantages with hair and, you know, just the ease of creating a material and adding complexity to it and so on and so forth. So
when it relates to game art too, if people are interested in doing game art as a passion or to get hired eventually or whatever, it is kind of an extra benefit that Unreal, since it's the commonly used engine, it is valuable to have experience there. Whereas Toolbag, I think of it more of like, it's like software that's made to make great presentations. I feel like we should also mention you chose a concept by another artist we work with, John Grello, who has these sick concepts. So this is based on his concept.
This was the original design. So like Jay said, we work with John. I just reached out and was like, hey, I'm doing an ArtStation Learn course. I would love to use your piece for this. And he was like, yeah, sure, man, go for it. Like, I love when people use my work. So you can see where the inspiration came from, and it follows the concept pretty closely. Obviously, there was some deviation, especially around like the collar area. I tried to have a little bit more fun with like what I put together and kind of trying to think about like some of the stuff that's underneath it and how it works together. And I think
kind of a Star Warsy vibe, like that retro futurism or something.
Some hydraulics in there, make it.
I like the little pistony pipe things. Cool. Well, maybe we can take a look at some source files too. Before we do that, though, you mentioned how this is challenging. I mean, I feel like the juggling of everything and the trying to put together a course, which is another thing all in itself. Was there an aspect of this project other than the teaching technical things, like just in the making of the model and anything? What was the most challenging or difficult part, or was it all pretty normal?
Overall, I would say it was pretty normal. Nothing really popped up that I was uncomfortable with. I think that the learning aspect of it and figuring out how to convey a message or what I'm trying to convey is where I stumbled a little bit. That was definitely a learning experience for me. I think just the whole experience was somewhat of a learning and somewhat of just an overall challenge because of the fact of I was kind of doing it all together at once, and this was my first time kind of taking that step into doing it. So I'll just go ahead and jump into some of the source files. This is the ZBrush model. For one of the ways that I like to work, have a very similar kind of methodology as you do. I like to do as much as I can by hand and just push my artistic ability, my sculpting practices, my texturing practices. I try not to rely on Marvelous Designer if I don't have to, just because I feel like it's a little bit more fun to do it myself than let the software do it. That also did come into play with this project. Like everything in this project was sculpted by hand except for the face, and I used Texture XYZ. But other than that, everything was done by hand. But yeah, this is the model for it. So.
First let me ask about Texture XYZ. How did you apply that? Did you apply it in the high poly? Did you apply it in the texture phase?
I actually applied it in the high poly. So I learned this trick from KB when he worked with us, and I had the Texture XYZ image, and I actually just would put it onto the masking or poly paint actually, and I would spray the information on, and then once I had that information, I stored with layers. I think I baked them down just to make the file a little bit lighter right now, but I would spray on the Texture XYZ map, and then I had it stored as a layer so that I could have a little bit more granular control over it. And then once I had the map done, I actually think the map might still be on the poly paint. Let's see. So this was the poly paint essentially. And once I had this, I went into the deform palette, and
so you did you painted all of it first. You did a whole mask and then just one kind of pop and popped it out.
Yep. Yeah. So it was super easy because with the poly paint, you can spray over itself and you don't have to like worry too much about like blurring and things like that. I just did a overall spray to the texture and then did an inflate with the layer. And so that gave me a little bit more control, like to dial it in, but I still have this information so I can mask. I lied. I actually did miss one step. I think I had masked by color information. So I converted it to a mask and then was able to inflate the detail off of it. And I feel like that gives a good result when you use inflate. It kind of gives a little bit more like volume to the shapes and stuff like that.
Okay. What Texture XYZ resource did you use? Was it like the sections or was it like a whole face map?
It was the whole face. I had bought a whole face like probably like 5 or 6 years ago when they first started to do the maps. So it's one of like the older maps. The stuff that they have now, I'm sure is way better. I haven't used any of it. Actually, I've used a couple of the drag textures.
I mean, another thing too to mention is that how many, people ask this, how many polygons is your head?
This one is 16 million right now. So I mean,
that's not too crazy.
Not crazy. Yeah.
I should say, because people get hung up on details, and people ask me about XYZ and all this other stuff. XYZ is used in Marvel movies and stuff. So they're very high resolution image resources that are from scanned data or photos. I think it's cool that the way you did it here is actually like not the highest resolution way, but your final outcome still feels very crispy. So I think it's important to mention that to people that are interested in all this detail. Like, I think the kind of the default, people just want to subdivide as high as possible and use as large textures as possible because they think that equals good. But we saw in one of your images how close you're getting to the skin. By you applying it in poly paint, it's limited. It's not pixels, it's polygons. It's like way less resolution. In offline rendering, they might like use a program like Mari or something to project these 8 or 16K mega with a bunch of like 32-bit depth, like insane amount of data, and then project them that way. So it's never in the high poly, it's only in texture, and then when they render, it'll like use displacement map to give you that geometry. So it's cool to see that you applied it this way. I think that's a lot more direct, and you can stay in ZBrush and not have to worry about buying this whole other package. But also the results are great, and I assume you mixed it with like some kind of micro tiling skin noise.
Yeah, in Marmoset and in Unreal 5, I used just a micro tile over the top of it just so that I could give a little bit more granular noise, because a 2K map for games is only going to get you so much detail, and so I just use that to kind of compensate for it. So this detail information I actually got from Substance Painter, and they have, like a library of skin materials, and this is kind of the method that I use for all of my detail normals. I just get like a flat plane, so I'm not baking or anything, and I just start dragging materials onto it to see if I can find a result that has a good normal associated with it, and then I just export that normal map. And so I exported it out one of the skin materials, so that's why you get like some of this like nice triangular kind of like surface scrunching and stuff like that. It's already a tileable texture, so it's relatively easy to get any kind of range. You're really only limited by the fact of like what Substance offers, which they offer 99% of the stuff you can need. So like I have detail normals for skin, for metals, for cloths, and that's how I get like my fine detail on a lot of my characters that I do for personal work and stuff. So
I noticed the eyelashes and the eyebrows are fiber mesh and ZBrush. Was that just an extra step that just for yourself, or did you actually use those in any renders like in Marmoset?
Yeah, so for the hair, they are a groom based. I exported out the groom as poly strips. Cool. I feel like I tend to run into an issue where as the face progresses, something feels off, and you notice it in my making of video that at a certain point there's like a dead expression on the character, and to kind of help my brain figure out what it needs to, I throw the eyebrows on. So I had done the X Giant groom, I exported it, got it in place on here, and I was like, oh, like she's like real like bug-eyed. So that kind of helped me compensate for what the face was looking like and make it feel a little bit more neutral in its expression and more naturalistic. So
absolutely, yeah. So getting the eyebrows, even the lashes and the eyes in there help you to look at the face and kind of use your intuition.
Yeah, for sure. And even the same thing with eyes. You can see in here I have a couple of different versions of eyes, but it's like this works fine.
Yeah, it's harder.
But it makes your job a lot harder than here. It's like a much more accurate representation of what I should expect. So like these eyes I just hand painted on one of my last projects, and I just throw them into any scene just so I can get some visual idea of what it looks like with pupils. Because without pupils, it looks creepy and it looks weird, and it just doesn't feel right. So once you get to that point where you're starting to kind of like, you're at that last 10% of finagling things, for me, it really helps to have that stuff, because if I can see the picture in its entirety, then I'm able to figure out what's wrong with it and ultimately get to the result I expect a little bit quicker. I wish I could say that I sculpt something and I'm like, oh, this is great, I don't need to make any revisions, but it's hardly ever the case. As things start to come online and come together for me, it's like, oh, this doesn't look right, this looks weird, I could change this. And so there's usually like a step in my process of I finished the model, everything's in place, and now I have to diagnose based on what the model looks like at that point and go back and make those small changes and revisions to subtle things that may not seem like they're very big, but do play a huge impact in what my image looks like.
I feel that 100%. I mean, it makes sense. Sometimes we have to work on these things in a vacuum a little bit. It's only when everything's getting together that the final context is there. And I do think that last bit and what really makes a character stand out, which I do think you achieved here, is a lot of those little things. You could have stopped and it would still be technically good. You know, you don't want to go too far because then it might be overdoing it and there's diminishing returns. But I do think all those little decisions, you know, it's kind of a culmination of a lot of little updates, little iterations that I feel like it's worth it. So
yeah, definitely. And, you know, I think that that's one thing that just kind of comes with time, obviously. You know, it took me a long time to realize that, because I think for a long time, you know, I'd have a model and I'd pose it and then I'd be like, oh, that looks good. But in reality, things look stiff the first go round. The face looks dead. There's just these small little things that it may not seem like much, but just by making those small changes can really help bring the piece together.
could you talk a little bit about the hard surface stuff, like around the neck? Like, how do you do that?
So for this project, fun fact, I actually did everything inside ZBrush, except
Nice.
for like maybe one or two things. The reason for that was, again, you know, I like to punish myself, I guess, but it was a good opportunity for me to like learn to use Z Modeler. So I just wanted to do everything that I could with Z Modeler. It was just sculpting out like a basic primitive form of it. And once I had it, I would mask out the form. So like this piece, for example, I had this shape, I would mask it out. Once I had it masked out, I would run a Z remesh on just the front face, and then I would start to extrude it, add like extra details, extrude here, extrude and inset it. So it was all inside of ZBrush. Was a little bit different, you know, because I'm used to working inside of Maya for hard surface. At this point, I feel like I can kind of consolidate doing anything and everything inside of ZBrush, just so that I don't have to leave it when I'm modeling. So I'm kind of trying to take that as an opportunity to, you know, cut out one package. So
Nice. Still, I assume still did some retopology and UVs and all that stuff in Maya.
yes. So the retopology, I still stick with Maya for that, and same with UVs. I do all of that stuff in Maya, but I kind of can join those two together, because obviously at some point we have to hand off the characters. So sticking in one package, then I can migrate everything over to that next package, and I'm not having to jump between the two just for the modeling phase. So
It seems like a lot of different packages and stuff. Why don't you just use Blender, dude?
oh, definitely not. Definitely not. You're gonna get the
That's going to be a
the
comment. That's
Blender-
why I said it. That's going to be a comment.
You're gonna get the Blender cult coming after me.
Yeah, there's always
no,
someone that's like, why don't you just do all this in Blender? This seems like a lot of work and money, guys.
I know. In reality, yes, you can do anything in Blender. That's fine. I started on Blender when I was in high school, but then once I went to college, we were using Maya.
Once you grew up?
Yeah,
Once you went to high school like 2 years ago?
Oh no, not that soon ago. It was 10 years ago. I'm you know.
Okay, you're getting up
Getting
there. You
up
got the
there
stash. Yeah.
I got the stash now. But yeah, I actually started on Blender. Then, like I said, once I went into college, like Blender wasn't seen as much of a useful tool as it is now. Like there were things there. I learned how to do like some effects, and I remember like the first thing I made was like a lightsaber in it, and I was like, man, this is the coolest thing ever. But then I got introduced to Maya, and I've just stuck with it since. And you know, I could definitely learn it. I could learn it, but you know,
I mean, I assume you could do retopo and UVs. That'd be fine, but definitely not the ZBrush stuff yet. You know,
yeah,
we'll see, but
you know, I know that everyone's gonna say, oh, you could do it in Blender or whatever. I like ZBrush. Like the way you feel about Blender, that's the way I feel about ZBrush. Is like I was very happy with my $800 purchase of it, and I have never regretted it since. So you know, I'm happy with my purchase. But
let me ask you about the hair. You mentioned doing XGen and stuff, which is a Maya thing. Have you done much XGen before? How'd you find that experience? It can be difficult to wrangle. You know, it can be time consuming too.
I think so. It wasn't my first time using it. I had done a project a couple of years ago when like the Andy Serkis Unreal video came out. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this seems cool. Like, so I looked at that project, and, you know, obviously with that project, they used hair-based XGen essentially to get their hair. But the biggest difference was their hair wasn't exported out to an Alembic file. It was exported out as geostrips. And so that was my first go about with it, was doing it that way. But it was like a short haircut, you know, it was an older man.
That was the priest?
Yeah, it was the piece I did of Max von Sydow and for like The Exorcist or whatever. And it was a little bit of a different workflow. It was an easier hairstyle. You know, he's wearing a hat. It was covered up. So it was a lot more manageable. So I kind of was able to like get my feet wet doing that test. And then with this one, I was like, well, I have a pretty good idea of how to do things. And I sculpted a block out, got an idea of like the volume of the hair. And then I just went in, built some curves and massaged it until I got what I want ultimately. And it's as good a results as you can get. So
yeah, no, it came out great. So like I say, especially the eyebrows, I mean, they hold up all the way. It's close. It's really cool. You know, you did a really cool breakdown in your presentation. You mind if we take a look at that and you can kind of chat about that? Because I definitely relate to that, especially looking back. I don't know if you felt the same at the time, but when I look back at like images as it progresses, you know, we talked about doing those like incremental improvements every day. You know, when you rewind the clock, it like really jumps out to you and looking bad, maybe more so than it did. Like you can kind of see the face continue to get better and then it just pops and like really all of a sudden.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just start the video over at the beginning. Like here you can see it. I still have the eyes that I painted in. So, you know, it looks a little bit creepy, but the eyes are proportionate to the head. And that was really the biggest issue that I had once I converted over to my in-game eyes. And you can start to see it pop right there. It's just super dead-eyed. Yeah, small, vacant. The pupil isn't taking up enough space. And I saw that and I was like, there's something wrong with the eyes. Let me get in the eyebrows and then I can start to massage from there. And that was really like the biggest kind of change in look. So dead-eyed. Comes to the next frame, still dead-eyed, but the eyebrows are in it.
I'm kind of surprised or something. Yeah, the eyebrows are kind of like not groomed right.
Yeah, and so once I had this image, I was like, okay, I can see where things are kind of falling apart. Made a little bit more progress with it.
There's one coming up where it really pops. Yeah, this is a good one where it starts. You can kind of see the path to the finish line here already. And then now it's looking really nice with the makeup and whatever else you did. Maybe there's more eyelashes, like it looks a little thin or something, but small things. I'm sure there's a lot of little things, like even lips and stuff, I guess, and proportions you're playing with each time.
Yeah, for sure. And really the biggest part was the eye shape between these two areas is because right here, it's an eye shape, but you know, like you said, this surprised look that it's like, oh, you caught me off guard. And I was like, that's not what I'm trying to get across here. So I need to fix that. And, you know, even just by changing where the eyelid was resting, that made all the difference for it. So
I mean, honestly, like from like a little micro expression, like I pick up a feeling now of her kind of, you know, doing a neutral stare, but like I'm better than you know what I mean? Almost smug or something, which is cool. Yeah. I think it goes with the character.
She has like an attitude to her in the concept. And I was like, well, that's something that I need to get across in the emotion. Here I was making a couple more revisions towards like the size of the lips and just kind of like overlaying it with the concept to kind of push it a little bit closer to that direction. Some variations in lighting to see how it's reacting. And then at this point, like I got all of the makeup in. I was able to get like the eyeliner in. Luckily, in situations where I do female characters and things like makeup, my wife is very talented at makeup, so you know, like I'm able to ask her like what's the actual way of applying makeup, and she's able to tell me. So like I kind of followed that same sort of approach on building up makeup on the character. It's a little bit hard in real time to produce like high quality look to makeup. I feel like I was able to kind of sell some of the powder on the face and, you know, just some of the eyeshadow and things like that. So, but yeah, overall, this is where it started to come together and this is how it kind of turned into the final look. So
yeah, man, great. I mean, I really don't have much questions. I just think it's really awesome. It's honestly like an unfair value right now. Like if you're if someone is interested in learning more about this, you know, ArtStation Learning is free, I think. Still, do you know?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. Once Epic bought it, I think they converted it to free. So,
and there's other things along with this, but this is probably going to be the highest quality content on there. Yeah, it's really remarkable. I'm also stoked just knowing you personally. You know, I think it's cool you starting to teach. You know, something that I've been doing for a little bit. And, you know, that's become a big part of my life. So I think that's great that you're starting to share your knowledge like this awesome stuff with other people too. So I'm excited about that. I'm sure, you know, if people are interested in learning from this, they'll want to keep learning from you. So I hear you want to continue doing that. You kind of like the experience.
Yeah, so far it's been good. I do have some YouTube videos that I do have planned based around this piece and another piece that I'm working on. So yeah, that's kind of
Great.
hopefully where things are headed here in the future. And I hope to just kind of keep the ball rolling. I think this is a really productive year so far for me, and I just kind of hope to continue that momentum through the rest of the year. So
Awesome, man. Yeah, dude, keep crushing it. I'll put the links to things down in the description too for people that want to, go check it out more. And again, like, you have to go. I mean, it'd be dumb to not go watch this stuff for free. Yeah, amazing. And then, I'll put your YouTube down there too. So when you start making videos, and we'll have to do it again. Yeah, thank you so much, dude, for coming on and sharing some of this info.
yeah,
I feel
for
like
sure, man.
we just scratched the surface, man. There's a lot of work in here, and I appreciate it. You can tell when you look at it up close.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course, man. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.